Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership with Heart podcast. I am tickled pink today. So excited to have two of my brand new founding facilitators on the show to talk to us about the art of active listening, the impact of them, some of the things that they're doing in the world just to make the world a better place. So welcome, Jen Fox and Chris McAuley. I'm so excited for you both to be here.
Hi, Heather. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
And of course, you, Chris, are joining us from Canada. So we got our first international facilitator, which I'm excited about. I know we're going to have more and more to come. Um, so tell everybody right now, let's just talk about a little bit about what you do. So Jen, you start first. Tell me, what are the things that you focus on in your business? And then why is this Art of Active Listening Facilitator certification such a good accompaniment to the work you do in the world?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I am the mother of three, which pretty much defines most of my identity, and also, the personal application to active listening, which we'll come back to. In my business career, I've spent the last 25 years inside and outside of corporations, but the through line really has been helping people to reach their potential, whether that's through delivering facilitated workshops, leading employee experience functions and learning and development functions, and also through my own coaching and consulting practice, which is what I am focused on right now. So I was really excited. Heather, as you know, we've talked about this before. I've followed your work for years. And so when you dropped me the message and said you're doing this thing, I was, kind of immediately on board and saw a place for it in the work that I'm doing, as well as, just wanting to be, part of this mission that I know you feel so strongly about. So thanks for having me.
And of course, I'm just thrilled that you're here. Such a strong force in the world for positive change and personal and people development. So I'm so happy to have you. Chris, what about you? Tell them a little bit about you and kind of why, like what value do you see this certification is going to be adding to your work?
Incredible value. Yeah, I spent a very long time in the corporate world where I was a business leader, and that really what I loved was being in that position. Building trust, developing employee connections, developing employee engagement. That was just where I lived when I worked for, I guess about 35 years or so. Now, in doing that, what I noticed was that listening was a skill that was so lacking. You were one of the first people when I got on LinkedIn that was really living it and really talking about it. And that's why I was so attracted to it, because I know it's so critical to be able to build trust, to be able to improve your culture in your workplace. Listening really is one of those foundational things that is so important, but I really don't think a lot of us are very good at it. A lot of us don't take the time to really slow down and understand what that means. So for me, it's something that I've always been interested in. And my business right now that I work in is I'm a corporate trainer. So I spend a lot of time working with companies to develop relational skills, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, which listening is really so important to make those work and to really improve on that. So I found this really fits into what I'm doing. And I'm also a speaking coach. So I work a lot with business professionals on speaking. And those listening skills when you're a speaker are also really important. Although you're up there speaking, some of those skills around understanding nonverbal cues and some of those other things are so important when you're up there in front of a crowd and you're delivering a presentation. Listening skills they're all over. They're in everything that I do and everything that I'm involved in. So I'm really glad to be doing this and so excited to see where this is going to take me, what's going to be, or how I'm going to be more involved with it. So.
Thank you for that, Chris. Jen, I'm curious to know what part of the cycle of active listening do you think people most overlook?
Oh my gosh, it's like the sum of the parts, and then when you break it down individually, I think there's power in speaking personally, so I'll sort of start there. They always say the best way to learn something is to teach someone else, right? So clearly there is some personal motivation behind me becoming a facilitator of this work as well, and that's that I know when I look across my career. One of the pieces of feedback I've been given over and over and over again is my bias for action. And it's like my superpower. I just get stuff done. The shadow side of that is like jumping straight into action, right? So it's like problem, solution. And I'm master at it, but to a fault sometimes. And so I think, Chris, you just mentioned sort of, kind of slowing down. And so I think that what draws me to your work is that it puts a process, behind listening. It's not just this conceptual sort of thing. And when I think about it, just by very nature of going through the steps, it forces me to have to slow down. And I think that the speed at which organizations operate right now, having anything that allows us to stop and methodically go kind of from one step to the next will always yield a better result. Because the speed of work right now is just calling us to like jump to the next solution and put out the fires. And I just think that that has people feel unseen and unheard. So it's hard for me to think about, any particular step. I think it's going through all of the steps that for me is really the superpower. And a lot of that has to do with slowing down and having an intention.
That's beautiful. I love that. I agree with you too. Although I have to tell you, I fall down the most on decoding. And it's like, it's what you're leading to, which is like, I am like you, which is probably why we're attracted to one another in that way, that we have affinity to action.
Yeah.
And so me inserting that decoding, that pausing, that reflection, and including more people in decisions before I make a decision, is something that it's like a message to me. And so every time I teach it, I am saying, Heather, Heather, Heather. And sometimes as I teach it, I may be moving quickly through it and I go, but decoding means pausing. Decoding means slowing down.
Yeah.
So I just keep reminding myself, I love the fact that I'm doing, like, there's this personal development for me that goes on as I teach this framework so that I continue to reinvest in the knowledge of it. And so your whole idea, like the sum of the parts, I really like that kind of reference that you make there a lot. So I am curious to know, for each of you, when you think of the usability for your clients of the cycle of active listening, kind of the workshop framework, just all the things, the tools that you're using, what do you think might be the biggest impacts for your clients? So like other workplaces, when you're doing training and things, what do you think might be the positive impacts, and maybe even the impacts that we aren't even thinking about that they may experience? Chris, you want to go first?
Sure. I think really I think what they're really going to take away from it is just how powerful it is and how important it is to be able to develop each one of those steps and go through that cycle to really create that listening culture, really, really, really develop that within their workplace. I think that's what they're going to take away. That's going to be so important. Because I know one of the things, and I thought I was a reasonable listener till I completed the facilitators course. And I think I shared this with you, Heather. I was shocked at the depth with which you go into what actually really truly listening is. So I think each one of those steps and really embracing the whole cycle is what's going to be so valuable to them and probably have the biggest impact that I can see on any organization that I'm going to go into and roll this course out for them. I think it's going to be so valuable. All of it, quite frankly, I think is what they're going to take away, and how valuable it is.
How about you,
And
Jen? What do you think?
Yeah, so my career has been really been organized within the human resources function. I'll speak about when I've sort of been inside the corporations because now I'm supporting them from the outside. And I would say I can't think of a single sort of struggle, issue, employee uprising. I mean, all the things over my career that would not have been aided by better listening. So say that first and foremost. So when I think about bringing a set of tools, like in a practical way, come and do the workshop, what are they going to get from that? One of the most, I think the lowest hanging fruit is in the close the loop step. And here's why. I think especially, sort of in 2020 and sort of the, pandemic years, the progressive companies, the companies kind of like leaning in on what was going on in the social environment, really started to take on this listening idea, right? Listening sessions and inclusion and belonging, and let's get all the feedback from all the people, employee surveys, and just like all of a sudden, all this input is coming in. And I think that it was well-intentioned and short-sighted, because I don't think there was a lot of foresight into thinking about what are we now going to do with all the stuff. And in some cases, I think companies are hesitant to even seek the feedback because they say, if we ask, then we'll have to do, as opposed to having confidence to say, we can gather the feedback, we can hear, we can validate, and then we can sort of, say yes and no and figure out what the strategy is. But the very act of closing the loop, such a simple thing, to come back and say, I've heard you, I've done the work, I've listened, I've gathered the feedback, and now here's what we are, or in a lot of cases aren't, able to do with your concern. Honestly, I think it's game changing. And I think it's a step that's most often overlooked. And so what happens then is you create this cycle of employees who start to get resigned of like, oh, why would I, fill out another survey? They never do anything with my feedback anyway. So I'm speaking at the organizational level because I've managed the departments that are responsible for like employee engagement, but it happens in the one-to-one level at a manager too. If an employee doesn't feel like their feedback goes anywhere and the manager doesn't close that loop, do you think they're going to keep bringing up their ideas and their suggestions and their concerns? Absolutely not.
Mhm.
So I think there's endless impact teams can have by taking on this work, but I think immediate impact will come from that last step, which is close the loop, which I think is what's often missed.
I love that. I'm curious to know, so whether at home or work, because when I again spoke with the other certified facilitators, they were talking about how they saw immediately their impacts to learning this psychoactive listening, how to really make it a part of them, and then they noticed the impacts to interactions with kids, interactions with their significant others. I'm curious to know, since you are now someone who's completed the certification, have you seen the way you handle disagreements or conflicts, like in your circle, whether it's personal or professional, differently?
Well, I can say on this one, so I have 3 kids, as I mentioned. My oldest is, in the teenage years. And at night, right before bed, is when everything comes out. And I have learned to, take that pause. And instead of jumping in with all my, opinions and experience and advice, is just to say, are you looking for my advice? Or are you looking for me to listen? And it had, it opens up a completely different space. And it forces me to sit back sometimes. But then also when she's open and says, no, I need your advice, it gives me more confidence that she trusts me and she is looking for, more guidance, and it lessens the number of eye rolls I get because now she's inviting the advice. I think when issues come up around the house, and it's often, this happened, and I try to say, how can I help? Right? Instead of coming in, with that solution. So I would say there's those sort of little moments in an active sort of household of 5. And I am so far from perfect, but definitely a work in progress in those areas.
I love that. Imagine me, the person who wrote the book on it, and my kids will call me on the carpet. And I cannot be honest, I'm pissed when they do it. Then again, I'm glad that they do it because I raised children who are independent thinkers who can be a little bit snarky, but at the same time, like I want them to call me on the carpet. And so occasionally they'll be like, and mom, you weren't listening. They'll do that kind of thing. And so that's where that affinity action starts to plop right in. And I didn't do the pause that you're talking about. So I totally get what you mean. I mean, when you start to see those changes in yourself and you can see the changes reflected in them, how maybe it's not a blow up situation like it could have been before or whatever. It does feel quite empowering, quite empowering. What about you, Chris? Have you seen anything different, just how you're interacting at home or interacting with clients in like a conflict situation or in a place where maybe there's a disagreement? Do you see any of your new learnings popping in by any chance?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I was one of those people who just thought that listening was just with my ears, and maybe I listened to a few nonverbal cues and maybe listened to the spirit that the message was being sent in, sort of thing. But to go down through those steps, I'm now, wow, very, very different listener. I think I am. I'm working on it, obviously. Certainly with my wife, it's just the 2 of us. We don't have kids anymore. They're gone. They're out and on their own. So with my wife, yeah, it's changed a lot in conversation and conflicts that do come up. Yes, especially in closing the loop, decoding. It's the reflection piece, I think. It's walking away because I always had a tendency of listening very quickly and closing things off. When in the course we talked about that knee-jerk reaction, which is very common, which kind of comes down to the way we work and sometimes the way we live. Everything's very fast. So for me, it's been really about slowing down and then taking the time to really reflect and the decode and then going back. And after I've done that and then closing the loop, kind of those 2 steps is what really stood out for me and what I think I've really applied both with clients as well as at home in my personal life for sure. So yeah, definitely.
In your own words, explain to me what you think listening means now, like with this newfound knowledge, given what you thought it was before. What do you think listening is now?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
and I'm feeling compelled to have something, perfectly polished, but I'm going to resist that. So is something in the realm of, I think, effective listening is having the speaker feel seen, heard, and understood. I don't think it is any way over here. And so we use this framework and the steps and the tactics to do that, but it's all in service of the person actually doing the speaking. So I'd have to polish that to make it more succinct, but something like that.
It gave me the chills. I loved it. I'm not really into polish very much. So I don't edit. It's hard to really edit out your life or edit out reality. And I don't think it's something we need to do. We're all human. So I appreciate that. And you're right. It is in that service. The call that I gave, the invitation that I continue to give to people is how can we all be catalysts for that kind of change in the world where people do finally feel seen, heard, and understood. So you calling back on that and echoing it means that your heart was in the right place, and I think that's perfect. How about you, Chris? What do you in your mind and your gut? What do you see listening meaning now that you have this newfound knowledge?
Really embracing the seek first to really understand. I think really understand what someone is saying. That to me, it's I don't know how to put it. More on a deeper level. I think it was I just used my ears. It was that two-way thing that I think we talk about in the course, where it's more than just me sitting here listening that one way. There's just so much more involved in it. So it really is about really truly giving that opportunity to be heard and to be understood, which is more than just using your ears to hear what someone had said. I mean, that's the start of it. Obviously, that's where it starts, but it's going to that next level down, and it's really it's really truly understanding what someone is saying from here, and giving them that opportunity, and giving them your time to be able to really listen to what is being said. I always just thought listening was hearing the words, kind of picking up the nonverbals, and then moving on. Now I know it's much more of a process that takes a little more time, and I think is so valuable to people when you do actually go through a lot of those steps. So yeah.
Can I add on? Can I amend?
Sure.
Also,
yes, please do
that.
amend.
I love that, Chris. Well, I'm just thinking, and part of it is what I work from home, and so I'm very much in the world that my husband works in as well, which is really tackling the world of polarization. Right, our country, Chris, your country, I know, all of it. Things are so polarized right now, and so if I add it on, it's like having people feel seen, heard, and understood, and it's like even and especially when you disagree. And I think if by adding that on right now in these times, it sort of brings an added level of responsibility around why we should learn these skills. It's not just about being a better listener to, get a promotion or be a better leader, but truly it's in being able to connect with the people around your table or in your community, because just the listening is not there. I will say, just in my own community, there's an active parent group. And I comment when I scan sort of, on social media, the conversation. I said to my husband, and nobody comes there to listen to each other. Nobody, not a single one. They come in to share their opinion and then defend it and defend it and defend it at all costs. There's no listening, at all. So I think that's an important element that I would add on to how I see listening for these times right now.
Yeah. Actually, could I jump on something as
well? Please do.
Made me think about that. So true in a conflict situation is I think what I've noticed now is as opposed to trying to be right, which is what I think we all try to do in those situations where we're going back and forth and we're in a conflict, it's about being right. So when we think that way, we're always preparing our responses while the person is still talking. We're not listening. We're thinking about, okay, how am I going to beat that? Here's what I'm going to say because I'm right and I know I'm right. When really that's not, it really doesn't take you anywhere. What really is important is really slowing down and understanding and trying to seek to understand what someone is saying. And I've noticed that when I've done that more, now that I've learned this, it does change. It does, you notice the person that you're in conflict with, they kind of start to back off a little bit and it becomes less of a competition and more of a dialogue and more of an exchange. That is, I will say, one thing I have noticed. Yes, and I think it's so important. Because a lot of the time when we're in conflict, it's always about who's right. I'm right, you're right, I'm right. And that's where it becomes a very much a competition as opposed to really trying to understand what you're trying to say to each other, because often you find you're both saying the same thing. That's the thing I find with this. And when you really go through some of those listening steps, you get there much faster. There's just less chance of that competition and that kind of conflict happening. So, yeah.
Love that so much. This conversation becomes kind of a meditation for me as well. Because it allows me to keep going deeper and deeper in the work. And I do like to go deep because I think this is where the whole listening thing is, right? When we're with it in front of people, if we're okay with going deeper with them, we get to the bottom of their truth. We can help solve for their truth and their needs, not ours. Many of us, pretty much all of us, like to kind of put our issues, our view, our filter on other people. And this listening framework really does require that we step away from that previous way of doing things and to really like do what I'm saying right now, which is really hearing your hearts, meditating on kind of not in a like a religious way, just kind of like breathing it in, taking in what you're saying and the whole spirit of what you're saying. I don't have to agree with you in order to hear you. And I think that is a big thing that they think when I sit and listen, that understanding means agreement.
Yes.
It doesn't. It just means I'm giving over my need to be right, to be myself, to be the one that has the biggest, loudest voice, to replace that with your need to be heard. And in this moment, that's the most important thing. I want you to be heard. Doesn't mean I will agree with what I hear. And that's going to be a big one for us as facilitators of this work. When there are going to be people maybe in the room who will be differing with what they say to each other, and how we can stand in the middle of that and still hear them and not get too tied up on even how we agree with either side, but to parse through and get through the truth of each, find a common ground, a way to move forward, you know? It's a lot of deep work. We'll be at this, and it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see where we go.
It's a big game, right? It takes the, this like applied in the context of, a team development workshop inside a corporation is profound. But this applied to, the state of the conversation, in the world right now, it's a big problem to solve, Heather. So we've got a lot of work to do.
That's exactly right. But you know what? It starts with one. And how I like to tell people that in order to change the world, you just have to change how one person thinks or one person behaves. Yeah. And you've already changed the world because you changed one person. So 6 of us go out there and we change 5, we just changed 30 people. In my mind, we're changing the world. So I don't get too overwhelmed by it. I just think it's going to be a constant work in progress, and we're all doing great work already. It's just one more thing for us to kind of go deeper on. On that topic, kind of wrapping up our conversation, I am curious. So for anybody who's like coach, consultant, trainer, and they're like, I already have 2 certifications. I don't need a certification. What do you think, in your own words, would be the benefit of them becoming certified art of active listening facilitators over what they already do at DISC, or what they already do at Myers-Briggs, or whatever they might do, from your unique perspective as someone who's been a practitioner before, but who now is working with organizations to make their cultures and their people better?
Hey, Chris, you want to start?
Sure. I really believe that I don't think you can it's not that you can't do any of those other things like DISC or Myers-Briggs or those other things, but listening is such an essential skill and is so important to everything that we do, that I can't see how you would not want to have this certification and to be able to take the time to do the deep dive on it and really understand what it means to truly listen and how valuable it can be. To me, I just think it's necessary. I think everybody should have the certification because I think I mentioned this earlier. I really believe that a lot of us are not good listeners. It's a common thing I find in a lot of organizations. I know I was guilty of it in my years of leadership. It was constant work, and so I think getting the certification is so important. It'll do anything. It'll help whatever else that you were leading or that you're involved in, or that the work that you're doing. It would just so enhance what it is that you're doing. I can just see it as so incredibly valuable. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that absolutely everything that you just said, and I think personally, as I said, I've always believed that the best way to, get something for yourself is to teach someone else. And so, I know when I facilitate workshops, regardless of the topic, whether I'm coaching or facilitating a group, there's always something in it for me. So I would say, selfishly, for the coaches and consultants out there, you will better your own listening skills, which will, pay off in your client relationships and, et cetera, et cetera. That's pretty easy to see. And then I think in terms of me and, aside from, sort of Heather just really being enrolled, by you and your mission is, I think companies right now, especially in the market that I'm in, as everybody's navigating this sort of changing world, the distributed sort of workforce, when they're coming together with a lot more intention, I found, than in sort of years past, where, before it was, just looking for the workshop or, kind of just the latest thing, right? Insert X assessment or topic du jour. And I'm finding now people are being intentional. Maybe they're in a remote environment, so they're bringing their managers together on a quarterly basis or something like that. And so through sort of that needs assessment of what's going on within their culture, what is it they're trying to create, I think this just adds a really nice thing to sort of a portfolio of offerings, knowing that if in that discovery I hear, sort of issues and challenges that really that core is a lack of listening, I have this now to say, hey, maybe this wasn't top of mind, but have you thought about, because I think, Chris, as you said, a couple of times in this conversation, it's kind of the root cause of so many things. But I use that analogy of sort of peeling back the onion and thinking about, they may think, I need, better communication skills, or I need a presentation skills workshop, or I need a conflict, whatever. And you ask a few questions and you peel it away and you say, oh, we're not actually listening to each other. Well, what if we started there and built those skills? So I just think in terms of, that's how I looked at this in terms of becoming certified. It's a great sort of thing to have in my toolkit, so that when I do that needs assessment with my clients, if I hear anything that I think has a root cause of listening, I can just say, here it is. Here's the model. And obviously, with the the credibility that you have in your talks and the books and things like that, it's kind of a no-brainer. So thank you for that, for the opportunity to sort of add this to my own toolkit.
Yes,
Love
thank
it.
you for sure.
Love it so much. Well, of course, and thank you for saying yes. And for those who are out there who are listening now or will listen, if something's calling to you in this, because I do think like the work I do is a calling for me. It's a mission in my world. As Jen's alluded, this is a problem worldwide, and it takes a lot of work. So it takes a lot of us kind of the legendary listeners in the world, the people who actually can go out and say, how do we not only mirror for others, like be the change we're seeking, and then help others continue to be that change. If that speaks to you, just reach out. We can have a conversation and see if this is something for you too. It's not for everyone. In order to be a catalyst of anything, you have to have the energy behind it. You have to have that love, that desire, that passion for this work. And so if you feel like this is, just reach out for sure. For you two gems in my world, thank you so much for joining this show too, and just know how much that I value you. I appreciate who you are in the world, and I'm just so excited to see what your journey is going to kind of show up for us here using this framework too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.